first have a look at what a modified Peacock Swirl is. Now, with a normal Peacock Swirl, you get your batter into your mould, whether you use jugs or squeeze bottles or whatever, and you have sort of a lined approach. You have lots and lots of lines of different colours. Now, when you've got those lines of different colours, what you do with a Peacock Swirl is people typically take some sort of comb. I must admit, I never used a comb, I just used one individual stick. And imagine this was your mould, and you've been putting all your colours in. I'll insert a video of me putting my colours in when I've done a Peacock Swirl before. And then what you do is, either with a comb, you know, one made with lots of skewers in, you then drag lines all the way across, perpendicular to how you've put the soap into the batter. And then, having done that, is when you do the actual Peacock Swirl. And the Peacock Swirl is basically this sort of S design, like this. And what happens with that is that you end up with little sort of fans in your soap that are sort of teardrop shape, but in the main Peacock Swirl they sort of have little stripes that go through them, which is what gives it the name of the Peacock Swirl, because it sort of looks like a peacock tail. And that's because you've dragged across down first and then you've done your main Peacock Swirl. So the modified Peacock Swirl, well, a modified anything is just when you take a technique and do it slightly different. But for the Soap Challenge Club, we had a specific rule about how we had to modify it. And basically the modification was not to use a comb to do this drag down across or perpendicular to how you've laid your soap in the mould. Now, there was nothing in the rules that didn't say you couldn't take one individual skewer and do it, but to me that's kind of going against the spirit of what the challenge was wanting, wasn't it? So essentially what's going to happen is we're now going to put all our soap in our mould, squeezing it all in on lines, and then just go straight in and do the Peacock Swirl design. And what that will do is, rather than give us this sort of fan shapes like that in our soap, excuse my dodgy drawings, you should know me by now, I'm rubbish at drawing stuff, we're going to end up with sort of like little teardrop shapes next to each other. So very similar, it's just that they're not going to have those sort of like little drag things going through them. Okay, so that's the difference between what we're doing in the traditional Peacock Swirl. Let's have a look at the mould I'm going to be using. Now, I do have a mould with dividers in, my nice custom craft tools mould, but that mould is a very square mould and it's only sort of 7 centimetres across. For this design, as the design travels down the bar, I kind of wanted a tall and skinny soap. So what I've done is I've grabbed my stainless steel mould that I've got, and it's a really wide mould. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description box below. It is a lovely mould. I don't use it a huge amount because it's not the normal type of shape of soap that I make, but it is a lovely mould. I'll leave a link in the description below. So all I've just done here is I've just taken some cardboard and just cut them to tightly fit the mould. Now there is a balance when you cut the card between it being tight, because you don't want these to be falling over, so they do want to grip on, but you don't want it too tight, because if you do it too tight, then either you can't get them in the mould or they're going to bow in the middle. So it's a little bit of a balance. Now you could make them a bit taller and put some tabs on them and stick them on and all of that sort of stuff. Bear in mind you're going to have to remove these. Now I've done mine flush with the top of my mould. Can you see that? Pretty well flush with the top. And that's because my soap is not going to come to the top of my mould, so I'm still going to have some space to grab them and pull them out. If you are going to make your soap to the top of your mould, make sure you make your dividers slightly taller so that you can grab them out easily without having to stick your fingers in all of the soap. And then all I've just done with mine, as you can see, I've sort of marked, I've just spaced mine out evenly, kind of where I want to pour everything. So yes, if you've got a soap mould that's got proper ready-made dividers, then that's great. If not, some cardboard will do. Some people cover them with plastic wrap, you know, sellotape or whatever you call it, wherever you live. I tend not to, just because I don't like the idea of just using all that sellotape for a single thing. These are going to be thrown away afterwards. They're nice and clean. The soap's not going to make them go all soggy and disintegrate for the amount of time they're in there. They're going to be absolutely fine for a one-use soap. Let's have a look at the colours I'm going to use in this soap then. So I'm going to do this with, let's talk about the scent actually, Library Book Fragrance, which is a great fragrance. It's sort of a leathery smell, slightly spicy, so I guess aiming more on the masculine side, but I actually like it as well, that sort of leathery, slightly spicy, and a tiny weeny hint of rose in there. So these are the colours I'm doing. This sort of blue is a metallic range. So this blue here is Shimmer Blue from Mica Mama. And then I've got Golden Shimmer from Mica Mama. Brushed Copper from Mica Mama. Bit of a Mica Mama day today. And then Antique Silver from Mica Mama. And then some good old titanium dioxide. So those are my colours and fragrance I'm going to be using. So the way I'm going to do these colours, and as you can see I've written the colours down the side of this mould, and they'll just wipe straight off, and probably some will come off as I'm pouring the soap anyway, is I kind of want them in this order. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry one colour down through into the next row, if that makes sense. So my top two, I'm going to have copper and blue in there, and every row is going to have some white in. So it'll be copper, blue and a bit of white. And then that copper for the next row is going to come out, and it's going to swap to blue and gold and a little bit of white. Then the blue will come out and the gold will stay there. So I'll have gold and silver and a little bit of white. And then at the bottom, I'm just going to have my two colours, my silver and my white. Okay, so that's my plans. So what I've done is I've worked out how much soap I need for each of those, because some colours, like the copper colour, I'm only using once. My white I'm using quite a bit, and the other colours I'm using twice. So what I've done is I've counted out how many portions there are and divided my soap up like that. I'm now going to get these micas. They're all micas, so nice and easy to disperse. I'm going to get them dispersed into some oil, into some jugs. Now, just a quick thing about dispersing in oil. I don't have a specific measurement. You know, I don't do this much mica and this much oil. I just plop a little bit in, because I don't want too much oil in here. You know, I want most of it in the batch. But what I am looking for is, obviously I want enough to mix the mica in. And that's mixed in nicely. But the other thing I want is I want for the mica to scrape and move nicely off the side. And can you see this one, this copper one, is sort of sticking a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just add a touch more of that and get that mixed in. Just because it then makes the mica, you know, if it's a little bit more diluted, that's much better. It's leaving my pot nice and clean now when I mix it in. And that's what I do really when I'm just looking at mixing in those micas. Okay, this one's a good example. Really a bit too thick. There we are, that's better, that's flowing now. Okay, so there's those mixed up. I've got my TD already dispersed as normal, so I'll add that to my titanium dioxide portion when I get round to that. Okay, so let's get our soap mixed up, making it all up in one go. So there's all my oils and my lye solution and my sodium lactate all going in here together. It will just fit in this jug. There's not been a lot of space, but it's going to be fine. Now I'm going to literally take this just to barely to an emulsion, because we've got to keep this soap nice and fluid for the entire pour and the swirl. Okay, that's all I'm going to do with it. Now that is not completely emulsified. You've probably seen me, if you've watched my other videos before, you've seen me do this before. Now if you're a newer soap maker, please don't do this. Take your soap all the way to emulsion. If you're unsure about how to spot emulsion, I've got a video on how to do that. But if you're a bit more experienced, a bit more confident, then this is fine. What you've got to bear in mind is at this point, if you left your soap at this point and poured it into the mould, it would split apart and you would have lye and oils and your soap would fail. So why it's okay for me to do this is every time I'm going to split some of this soap off into its component parts, like to fill these colours, I'm going to mix it all up first so I'm getting the right proportions. And as I keep mixing it and stirring in the colours, it will then come to emulsion, and I will check that it's properly emulsified before I pour it into the mould. So I'm just going to pour all these colours off and into the little jugs. I'm just going to do that off screen because I'm sure you don't want to or need to watch me just pouring stuff on a scale, and I'll be back once I've done that. Okay, so here are all our different colours. Well, not yet, they're at the bottom of the pots, aren't they? So we can just get those mixed in. This is my golden shimmer. I love this colour. All of the micas from Mica Mama, I mean, they're an amazing mica company. They are brilliant. We're very lucky in the UK. We have access to some really, really great mica companies. All the ones with a shimmer in the title actually give a shimmer in your soap, whereas a lot of micas are very dead and very flat. The shimmer range from Mica Roma do actually add a sparkly shimmer, and I've often had people say, how's your gold all sparkly like that? It's because of the golden shimmer mica that I've got. This antique silver as well does have a little bit of a shimmer to it, and all these metallics, these sort of metallic-y type colours, the bronze, the golds, the silvers, do give a shimmery finish. They're amazing. This big pot is my TD, so let's get that popped in. And then what I'm doing here is, as I'm mixing each colour in, I'm just smearing a little bit up the side of the jug. And what I'll do is I'll just keep an eye on that for a minute or so, and to see if that oil splits apart. If it doesn't, then it means I'm now emulsified and okay to pour. And if it does, then obviously I need to wait a little longer and stir these a little bit more. Yep, I'm pretty okay with that. Okay, now with this fragrance oil, I am going to just divvy it up. It's got a good safe usage rate. You can put, I think it's something like 17% according to the IFRA in your soap. I'm only putting 3% in my whole soap. That's all we're allowed in the UK. So for me, just to sort of eyeball it up and split it out is going to be fine, because there's no way, considering this is a swirl and it's all going to get mixed up, I'm not going to have any parts of the soap where there's a potentially dangerous amount of fragrance oil lurking. So I'm pretty happy just to go through and divide it up. Okay. Now I've got a variety of squeeze bottles. No deliberate intent here, these are just the ones I've got. I don't like big squeeze bottles, so I don't have many of them. But I am going to have to top these up a little bit, which is okay. Okay, I don't think this is all going to fit in one go. Okay, so let's get this poured. Copper, blue, and I always want white. Now I'm going to start off, just literally a couple of squeezes. And then, because I want the blue in the next one, I'm going to go straight in with the blue there. Copper, blue, copper, blue. Then I want gold. Okay, so gold, gold. And then silver. This one has silver. And this one has silver. And then this one has white. And then they all have white. Okay, and then off I go again. Okay, so now I'm just going to pull out my dividers. Let's give this a tap down first. Okay, let's get these dividers pulled out. I'm not going to worry too much because this soap is still nice and fluid. There's not going to be that much on the divider, so I'm not going to muck around with scraping them. The bits that come off can go into sample soaps. And I deliberately have not filled this mould right to the top because it would just make the bars too big, you know, so not going to be the right number I want. Okay, so now we're done with that, let's swirl it. And each time I come out from this S pattern, I'm going to wipe my little swirl tool down. Okay, so there we are. So I'm going to cover that, and it's going to be boiling hot in my little studio today because it's hot weather here and this really heats up. So I'm just going to cover it and then just leave that to gel on its own. Here's our soap the next day. I'm really pleased with those colours, and I actually really like the bottom of the soap. That's come out really quite pretty as well. It's not got the sort of modified peacock, but it's a really cute little design on the bottom there. It smells really lovely, that sort of mixture of the leather and the tiniest hint of sort of a nice tobacco sort of smell, not like old cigarettes. It's just a really nice masculine scent for this one. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just trim off the very ends of this, and then I'm going to cut it across in 6cm sections, because we want the top of the soap and obviously the cuts inside to be the face of the bars. Now, if you haven't got a fancy cutter like this, maybe you've just got a normal single wire cutter, you could do this in exactly the same way. People sort of think you need a loaf splitter to do horizontal cuts. You don't. You know, you could just cut your single wire cutter. If it will cut through a normal bar, it will cut. This is just like you cutting through a normal bar. So just cut your normal bar, and then you would just tip it on its side. Okay, so you don't need a fancy cutter. Okay, and then with these, I may need to plane the top a bit. Just, can you see, just right on the edge there, it goes up a little bit. It's a little bit wonky, so I'm going to measure from the bottom. I'm just checking. Yeah, so I've got plenty of room there. So I'm going to make these, just to make them all about the same. I'm going to make them just over 3cm each. So let's set that up on my little cutter. Okay, and let's just get these cut now. Really cool, isn't it? It's not quite what we need as a modified peacock swirl there, but it's a pretty cool design. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the other bars that I've got, and these ones are definitely, I'd say, more correct in the terms of the peacock swirl, because, oh, let me put it down. Can you see all those little sort of little teardrop shapes that we've got going here? And then here's another one with all the little teardrop shapes. I do like those first ones that I cut. Oh, where were they? I do like the design on those first ones that I cut. I think they're really quite groovy, those end ones. And I also like, the back of them. All of them have got this, well, the ones on the bottom have got this great back on them. So I do think they're a really nice bar of soap. These ones, as I said, the first ones that I cut, probably not a correct peacock swirl. So still a nice soap, but probably not quite correct. Now, for the challenge club, for this technique, we didn't have to use a loaf mould. We could use a slab mould if we wanted. So what I've done is I've made up a smaller batch of those colours because I've got a little slab mould, and I thought I would do a different pour into a slab mould and still do the same overall techniques. I'm still going to do the modified Peacock Swirl, but I get my soap into the mould in a different way, and it's going to be in a slab rather than a loaf. So here are all, these are the same colours as I've just used, and I'm just going to layer them into a jug. Now I'm not going to get them all in one go, and that's fine, I can refill. And I'm basically just going to do sort of like a thin lines pour with these.
Then I'll just leave you with a final picture of this last soap that I did in the slab mould. I hope you enjoyed this video and you liked the soap. If you have, it would be great if you gave me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see what I'm making in the future, why not subscribe to my channel? Thanks for watching everyone. Happy soaping!